Today I am bringing you all of my spoilery thoughts while reading The Bonehunters by Steven Erikson. This is the 6th book in the Malazan Book the Fallen series. If you are new to my channel, then I'll leave the playlist linked in the description just in case you would like to check that out. This video is going to contain spoilers, so if you haven't read this book yet, then you might want to click away unless you don't care about spoilers. But this video is going to contain spoilers. I'm also going to be joined by my partner Sam. My name is also Sam, just to make things extra confusing, but we recently filmed a spoiler discussion at the halfway point of Malazan where we talked about how we were finding things so far. He's rereading the series, I am reading the series for the first time, and because we really enjoyed that discussion, he decided to join me for this reading vlog. So yeah, the next clip you're going to see is our thoughts on part 1. I'm filming this intro having already filmed the rest of the vlog, but this video is going to be split into sections where we update our thoughts at the end of each part until we get to the end. Sam also does have an Instagram, which I will leave linked in the description, where he occasionally talks about books and reviews them. I forgot to mention that when we filmed our discussion before, so I'll leave that linked in the description just in case you would like to check that out. But otherwise, let's get into the video. So we have reached the end of part 1 in The Bonehunters by Steven Erikson, book 6 in the Malazan Book the Fallen series, and I thought because so much happens in this first part, there's so much setup, I thought we could start by talking about the Malazans and what's happening there with Yucatan. I don't know how to pronounce that, but I thought we could talk about everything that's happening in that area because there's some really cool stuff that's going on there. And then hopefully we can spiral off from there because there's so many different groups. Yeah, I know, this is my notes for this first part. Let's start with the foreshadowing, because you said something really interesting when we did the discussion video about Tavor being one of your favourite characters. And I found that really intriguing because I find Tavor an interesting character, but we didn't get to see much of her in book 4. We're seeing the similar sort of thing in this book, but we've got a little bit more insight into her. And there was a really fascinating section. Basically, it was at the start of chapter 5. There's a quote I've written down where it says, "The events at Yucatan could have been a fatal wound for the Malazans were someone else in command." So this was written by Duca, seemingly in the future, and he's reflecting back on that time. So to me, that says the Malazans are going to win. I feel like that's foreshadowing. Obviously, I know that you've read this series before, so don't tell me. But I feel like that is so interesting because he talks about Tavor and how there's been so many hints that she's much more capable than people think, but she's not really been given the opportunity to show that yet.
No, her sister, we got in book 3, her sister describing her as cold iron.
Yes, keeps coming up.
Yeah, that cold iron term. We got Dujek, who can be cold iron, and the other.
Leomund is cold iron.
Leomund is cold iron. And
that's who's against each other.
Exactly, yeah. And yeah, she's still remote as a character because we obviously haven't had any POV from her at all. However, we get the sense again from the characters that are surrounding her what she's like, you know, which is really interesting. We got that moment when the fists are doubting her again, Tembrota and Blistig, both doubting her, wanting Keneb to talk to her about it. Yes. But he was basically like, back off, let's see what she does. She still hasn't had an opportunity to really prove herself yet, because even though in book 4 she did actually, you know, defeat the Apocalypse army, it wasn't in the way that I think anybody really envisioned. So I think this is her first test at actual warfare. But there's hints throughout this book when she's describing Dujek's army and not wanting to use his support. One arm is broken from the events from Memories of Ice. She's
very switched on as well.
She's very switched on. We got that from Fiddler.
She's talking to Keneb at one point.
She's talking to Keneb about that, and then Keneb goes out of the tent, talks to Fiddler, and Fiddler has those music, and he's just like, because Keneb says, "Why do you think we're not using one arm support?" And he's just like, "Yeah, he was broken." And then he basically says, "Oh, she's more switched on than I thought because she's aware of that. She can see the signs." Yeah. So that's really interesting. She's not using Kalam
She sent them off.
She sent them off. Yeah. She sent Pearl away. She doesn't want to use him because she knows that, you know, he's a spy for the Empress.
Doesn't trust him.
But we also get the sense when we talked with Ganos and Apsalar, and Ganos has that story of when she was younger playing with toy soldiers and creating armies and things like that. That again, it gives you this idea that she's again more switched on to being in this position.
I feel like we've been building up to this moment.
We have been building up to this moment.
Yeah, like throughout, like as in like from earlier books, I feel like it's been foreshadowed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
she's much more capable.
Even from book 3 when we first really met her. Absolutely.
Keeping with the Malazans, we mentioned Callum and Quick Ben. They've gone off. They're currently in the Imperial Warren. There's these floating cities, you know, like Moonspawn. What are they called? The Kachane Chamales, like.
Yeah, I think they're called Skykeeps.
Skykeeps.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, similar to Moonspawn. And that, see, it's so interesting because we met the Kachane Chamale. We got a little bit
Seen them a few times.
Insight into them in book 3, but then they've kind of popped up a few times. And in this particular book, they've been mentioned more than once. So with Clam and Quick Ben, there seems to be an army of them in the Imperial Warren. And when I read that, I was like, where have they come from? Because I thought that they were extinct. Like they were gone. Seemingly, that's what we've been led to believe. Mappo and Incarium have also come across some of these Skykeeps. And then Karsa,
one on the ground. Yeah.
Karsa has just fought one of them. So like they're seemingly not as extinct as maybe we were led to believe.
No, I don't think so. Like, again, I don't think there's ever been a line in this series where it's stated that they are extinct.
That's
again,
just
it's just our assumption up to this point, because in book 3 we'd often get a matron of the Kachane Chamale appear and raised their undead kin, the Kell Hunters, but they were undead. We haven't really seen many live ones. But yeah, what's happening with these Skyforts? Why is there an army of Kachane Chamale coming through the Imperial Warren? And it's insinuated that Imperial Warren is kind of aspected to the Kachane Chamale in some way. I don't know if that's true or not. But what are they doing? Where are they going? But bear in mind that there are continents, again, more continents in this world that we still haven't been in or talked about. Because
previously, the Imperial Warren, what was it at the start of book 3 with Calla? Cruel did something to take that continent that had been decimated
and
by
recreate
Calla
it in some way.
And so that's what I said. It just never occurred to me that maybe it was linked to the Kachane.
No, I don't know if that's true. Again, it wasn't stated that when Quick Ben and Killan were talking about it, that was the case.
Yeah.
And I still agree with you when you thought that the Imperial Warren was related to Calla and Cruel having that discussion at the beginning of book 3, because it makes sense, because we know that Warrens can be just created. We know these worlds such as the Mybe's dream world, the Dream Warren, that was created I think it was to store the Beast Throne and the memories. I think that's now where the throne of the Beast is being held with Tog and Thandaray, which is really interesting.
So many moments throughout this series where something will happen and I'll be like,
it just turns possible? It is possible. Yeah, absolutely. Again, that I think we'll figure out more on that later in this book, or maybe another book in the future. Because
again, like there's a lot of things that come up from previous books, like the dragons. I feel, especially with the last book and this book, we're getting more insight.
We're getting more
into the dragons
lore on Starvale Demlane and full-blown dragons. We got that little bit of a. I'm saying info dump, but it wasn't an info dump in the way it was like the way we were told. But how Cruel used the dragons and their elemental aspect to create the Warrens.
I loved that moment,
which was really cool, because I'd completely forgotten about that, even from a reading perspective. Didn't think about it whatsoever. And we got another dragon, chained and crucified with what seems like an octoral spike through its throat on Blackwood, which we know is resistant to magic from book 4 or book 5.
That's the Tista
That's the Tista trees. That's what they're made out of. But why is it there? And is that linked in some way to the Otatoral dragon, which is which Pearl and Lestara saw in book 4?
And then there's other dragons in the realm of Shadow.
Yeah.
There's 3, isn't there, that have been chained. I loved that scene where Cotillion was having a conversation with them. They were trying to barter for their
they were trying to barter for their freedom,
freedom.
and Cotillion was trying to get information.
Yeah.
You had Edgewalker there, which again, a completely new character. What is he? What is he doing in Shadow?
One of the first things I noticed when I opened the book and I saw the character list, I thought, I know so many of these characters. It's going to be
refreshing,
great.
isn't it?
It's refreshing.
It's refreshing with a Malazan book where we finally got to a point at the beginning of a book where all the POVs we know.
But not all of them, because there's been some new characters that have been gradually introduced. We're getting a lot more on the nameless ones as well in this book, I feel.
They're being more active in this.
They seem to be a very active player, and right at the start, it might have even been the prologue, the nameless ones and also Sister Spite is with them, and they release Djem Nebral, who was born on the death of the First Empire, who's a Troll Baral demon. He's a divers. And he's
a diver made up of multiple Troll Barals.
So he's been released. He was a, demonic creation by Decim Bacillus, the first emperor.
Yeah, the emperor of the First Empire.
So he's been released, and we got confirmation that he was sent after Mappo, and there were little hints that the Nameless Ones, we know even from book 2 that the Nameless Ones have some kind of plan for Icarium, because it was them who set up for Mappo to be Icarium's companion. We've known that since book 2, and now it seems like they want to get rid of Mappo.
Yeah, the odd thing is they destroyed a whole village, his village.
Yeah, to manipulate Mappo.
To manipulate him into following Icarium and making sure he doesn't remember and he's not able to release his rage or whatever it is, his power on the world. But now that plan's changed, or they've hit a point where they need to do something else, because obviously now they're trying to take Mappo out the equation. And I think it was stated in that prologue that when they were going through the rites that they're going to bring one unimaginable force against another.
But who's the other?
They
obviously want Icarium to go up against someone.
And then and we have that Taralak Veed, who's one of the Nameless One's agents, who's been following along. So what's his job?
I feel like all of this is tying into the God War, which I'm assuming this is the main plot now of the series is, the crippled god versus whoever, the elder gods maybe.
Yeah, well,
and we were actually discussing this, weren't we, about how it seems like it's the elder gods versus the crippled god, but maybe the younger ascendants, the new ascendants, are kind of trying to decide, okay, well, which side do I take? Because it's much more complex than the crippled god is the enemy who must be eliminated. He has pretty valid reasons for being annoyed that he's been dragged into this world.
Yeah, because obviously initially when that chaining happened, we knew some of the bigger ascendants as well as the elder gods were there. We're getting a sense now on where some gods are kind of falling in line.
Because I'm sure I vaguely remember in one of the previous books that Plael, the god of disease, seemed to take the side of the crippled god, and now there's a plague in 7 cities. It's been mentioned. I think that was mentioned in Aspelar's perspective, which we'll come on to because I've got some stuff to say about that. But we have known from the beginning of this book that Drek priests are being killed. And so that seems to indicate, Drek is probably on the side of... Not
necessarily. I don't think we've really got Drek's the Worm of Autumn, I think he's called, or that god is called. But I think it mentioned when Aspelar was talking to Ganos that the priests of Drek are aspected to or some of them are aspected to the Warren of Denel, which is healing.
Yes.
And it was mentioned in that one where there weren't enough healers. Where all the priests, they're all dead and stuff, and they were healers, so maybe that's one of the reasons as to why Polyal's doing what she's doing, because it means that there's not enough healers to stem the plague.
That would make sense, actually.
That could be the case.
There's just so much going on, it's so hard.
But it could be as well. It could be as well that the Worm of Autumn Drek is counteropposed to the crippled god Polyal and whatever other gods have fallen on that side.
That's the thing, there's so many gods that we don't know what side they're fallen on yet.
Ascendants as well.
Even, with Shadow Throne, we
don't know what their actual plan is.
No.
We know Shadow and Kurald Emmeline has a big part to play in this whole series because it's been a massive theme in this book throughout, like, nearly every single book. It's been like centre of attention, this shattered warren holding the first throne, that shadow throne. It seems to be a big integral thing in this book. So I feel like, again, their plans are going to be very integral
because we've got Heberic, Cutter, Crocus, Scalara, Felison and Grey Frog. They're all off taking Heberic back to this jade statue to do something. We don't quite know.
Well,
what give back the power I've kind of got.
So we know from book 4 when Heberic was having that vision in his tent.
You could see the jade.
You could see the jade, all the jade statues kind of coming through, and all the souls coming through behind, following the crippled god, and they seem to be trapped in these statues still, and he's going there to do something. Now there was a line which was really cool in this book where Cutter was talking to him, and he mentioned something about, because Heberic mentioned the word freedom. Cutter said freedom for Scylla and Felison, and Heberic didn't reply. He didn't say yes or no. So it's like, is he going there to free these souls that are the followers of the crippled god? That's, I think, the assumption that I'm making right now.
But then that's against what Shadow Throne and Cotillion
No, not necessarily. We don't know what Shadow Throne or Cotillion are doing. We have no clue what they're doing right now in terms of their plans for the crippled god. We haven't seen them, like, except from, was it Cotillion and Shadow Throne which gave the Jaggetts in book 3 the gateway to Burn to stop the poison that was happening with Burn? I think it was those characters.
Yeah, it was,
we know that they are stopping certain events from, like, occurring that the crippled god wants to happen, because that was completely against the crippled god's, like, plan. Again, we don't know where Treach is falling, and obviously Heberic is a follower of Treach now, being the Destriant. We know that Cotillion wanted Cutter to go and help keep Felison the Younger safe. We don't necessarily know if Treach and Cotillion are, besties, or if they have anything to do with each other. No point. No, we can't assume that because they've had no interaction, that god, as well as we just know that Treach is newly ascended to godhood. But again, we don't know. We just do not know.
I'm very intrigued to find out what the plan is with Cotillion and Shadow Throne.
I think that's a really, really big thing in this book, and it's really interesting because they've been in the shadows for so long in this series, like playing their games, because they've been pulling the strings with all the Malazans, like Cutter, Callum.
They've sent Aspelar off on some quest. Like, she seems to have a list that she's working through. Yeah. I made a note about Telerast and Curdle, 2 new characters that we've been introduced to, another duo. I don't think I love them as much as Bug and what's his name? Tahol from the previous book. But I do think that they have personalities. They do.
I think it's really interesting. Like, I think you've really got to read into their dialogue that they're saying, because they give away some really big hints.
They say some stuff every so often that seems to be nonsensical. It's funny because they'll say something and they'll be like, "Oh no, don't say that." Like, because they're clearly ghosts, like spirits. They speak to Standy, and they said that they were once great mages, mistress of the 1,000 Warrens, or mistresses of the 1,000 Warrens is something else that I've written down. I have a theory that they were dragons.
Wait, it's heavily insinuated that they have links to Starville Demlane.
Yeah.
But the reason why they could speak to Standy is because I think
they were inhabiting bodies,
and so they might just gain their characteristics after some time.
I could be off, but I think they're dragons.
Well, dragons are pretty heavy in this book, so it's not,
it would make
not a bad guess.
So we'll see if I'm right in that. And then the only other things I've got written down, just quick things. So in Aspelar's POV, she also came across people from the Tregale Trading Guild, the big caravan, which I think is what this thing is on the front cover. Don't know what's going to happen there. I wrote down quickly, Casa has linked up with Samar Dev, who is some kind of witch
slash inventionist,
and they're heading
to this island in the north of the 7 cities continent. We know that there is like 2 people there, but we don't really know much about that. We don't know really the reasonings why Cass is going over there.
Lots of setup,
but I do like their characters in this. We get a little bit more not just Carcer being, oh, guy I want to kill over there, go kill him kind of thing. We get a lot more philosophical musings from both of them.
Carcer is not my favourite character, but I am intrigued by this Samar Dev character. And I think I find Carcer more tolerable when it's other people who are making observations about him, when he's not like the POV.
No, that's fair enough. I think it's just Erikson giving you, Carcer's power level, because we know he's in some way ascended because of the way he's able to take damage, the way he's able to heal. And I liked we got the first kind of little bit of info done from Apsalara and Ganos Parin on like what ascension means. It's like coming into power. I think that's what she described it as. So that's really interesting because certain terms in this series are quite difficult to understand and grasp. Like, what is the difference between an Eldar god, a god, an ascendant, an all person? Like, it's difficult to understand because they're quite vague, the terms. I had difficulty the first time I read it. But we haven't talked about one of my favourite characters in this book.
I have wrote his name down, Crab.
Yeah.
And Leomund. So we were introduced to Crab at the end of book 4, and he has this idolisation of Leomund. He has this blind faith that Leomund is going to show them the way and is going to lead them. And I wonder whether Steven Erikson is leading us towards some commentary on that. I don't think that's going to go how he thinks. He was almost acting like a jealous partner when they get to Yugatan, and there's this Quantali sergeant or captain.
Yeah, a Malazan, basically. Dunsparrow.
Yes. And Karab is like, don't like her. But
it's interesting because he's in terms of how he thinks, it's very simplistic. He obviously has a lot of faith in Leomund, but we can see Erikson like foreshadowing like something's going to occur because he kind of, I think he even says like Leomund, instead of Leomund of the Flails, Leomund the Fallen, so maybe he doesn't think whatever Leomund's got planned within Yugatan is going to be good.
Maybe he's going to lose his faith and he's going to think, I know best, I'm going to do what I think is best, and that's going to cause or contribute to the failure. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
We'll see.
Maybe, but obviously we've got a big build up for this next part.
Oh, I know. The next part is 2.5 hours.
Next chapter is 2.5 hours.
The next chapter, and I'm assuming it's going to be to do with that siege or the battle. I think we wrap up part 1 here because we've been filming for 26 minutes. Remember when I said this was going to take 10 minutes?
There's a lot to talk about.
I know, yeah. It's a lot to talk about because there's been a lot of setup, but I think it's been interesting and I'm very excited for part 2. Hi everyone. So we have reached the end of part 2 in the Bonehunters, and the first thing I think we should talk about is that first chapter in Yugatan, that 2 hour plus long chapter where Leomund really did just want to watch the world burn. I can't believe how that was foreshadowed. I think if you talk about what you liked about that chapter and then I'll talk about what I liked, I feel like we have quite different views and different things that we liked about it.
Yeah, so for me, like you said, the foreshadowing was all the way through the beginning of this book.
Because you knew it was coming.
I knew it was coming, so I was able to pick up on that foreshadowing, which I didn't do the first time around.
Yeah.
But there was lots of elements of fire that were talked about constantly in reference to Leomund and Tavor. In terms of the actual chapter, I think it's an absolute cinematic masterpiece. It's probably one of my favourite chapters in all of Malazan. I think just the way that Erikson dealt with the horror of the scene, but then had some like humour mixed in, I thought was really, really well done. I thought there was a great balance throughout that whole chapter. Some of the deaths that we obviously saw for some of the characters that we'd been with for multiple books. For example, Truth, him sacrificing himself knowing that he could run through that fire and get to the palace gates to destroy them with the Moranth munitions, I thought was fantastic. And then Gesler obviously trying to deal with that. Pella, again, known him since book 2 on Ottarl Island, and then some of the other characters, I thought, some of the scenes in that were horrific. The second half of that chapter, when they were going through the tunnel to try and escape, I thought was brilliant. Again, some of the humour scenes, figuring out like who Crump was, for example. One of the Bowl brothers, which again we know about from book 3. I thought that was really cool. I thought there was a scene which just made me laugh out loud where they realised it was the Queen of Dreams who allowed Learman to escape, and then they kind of came up with this plan to maybe talk to her themselves to try and get them out as well. And then they heard this noise in the background. They all turned around and Crump's just pissing on the Queen of Dreams altar. I thought was so funny. Again, when they're going through that tunnel, some of the humour elements really hit home for me when one of them was tickling the other guy's feet and he was just giggling. I thought was great. The backstories of some of the characters we got through that scene as well, with Smiles, Korik, was great. The reunion with Hedge and Fiddler, the moments where Erikson was saying, like, when they were stopping for rest, they were the most horrific times because they didn't know if they were going to continue again if they were trapped. I just thought it was really, really well done.
I think we got to know Bottle a lot better through that chapter as well.
Yeah.
Because he was obviously leading the way. He, was using the rat to to try and find a way through. So I really liked that. I still feel like there are too many characters, too many Malazans for me to care about everyone, to remember everything. But I don't feel like I have as good a memory as you. And so when characters come back in from, say, books previously, it takes me a while to think, okay, so who is this person? I'll recognise a name and I'll ask you, I recognise this name, who is this person? I feel like I should know them. And because of that, it means that the emotional impact isn't as strong. But for example, with Truth, I could still see on the page, like Gesler and his reaction and how that continued throughout the chapter. I could still empathise with him, but I wasn't feeling it myself because in my mind I was thinking, okay, so Truth, he was friends with Gesler, he was with that group when they were on the Salander. Because there's just so many characters, it's too much for me to remember everything about everyone, but I can still appreciate how Steven Erikson writes grief, for example. With Gesler, I could still see that, empathise. For me, what I found really tense throughout that chapter is Fiddler. I thought, is Fiddler actually is this it for him? Because he was obviously quite, severely injured. I thought Karab's development...
Yeah, I didn't even talk about Karab. I thought his development through that scene was incredible.
Because I'd kind of had an inkling in the beginning of the book that something was going to happen there, that he was going to maybe lose his faith in Learman, because that's what we'd seen of his character up until that point,
definitely
is that blind faith. And I knew something was going to happen there. And so to see him link up with the Malazans...
Yeah, with Korab, I thought it was him making the decision to stay and die with his soldiers, then finding the kids, and then obviously when they got to the temple, they all found him with the kids, not trusting him, and then obviously pulling Fiddler along all the way through that himself, tying him up so he can obviously pull him through the tunnel. And then you had that scene with Fiddler and Korab where Korab's like asking Fiddler his name, and in truth he's got 2 names, but Fiddler gave him his own one, his Bridgeburner name, which I thought was a really, really clever way of just Erikson stating that trust is now there between those 2 characters, that he's able to give away that real name. Again, I thought that was a really, really big emotional impact.
I'm really curious to see what's going to happen when they link back up with the 14th, because Sin and Captain Farad'n Sort, they have been exiled. Sin had that sense. We've got the reveal that she's potentially a high mage, and so she had that sense that the Bridgeburners, not the Bridgeburners, but you know what I mean, like
her brother Shard, they were still alive, but no one would believe her. But Farad'n Sort, obviously a veteran, saw that she was trying to get into the city. They all thought that she was just, mad at that point, going through the events that she did. But Farad'n Sort, they thought that she'd lead the army after the events, but obviously she was just going to see if there were some Malazans alive.
That was foreshadowed as well in some of the early chapters when Bottle wanted to kill her because she killed his scorpion. And she almost did the same again to the rat. But there was that line, who was it? Someone foreshadowed and said, oh no, she's essential, we can't do that.
Oh no, I think that was people realising that she is a proper veteran of, I forgot where it is, it's Corelli, I think, where the storm wall is.
Yes.
Where it's mentioned that they're fighting against these like storm riders, which are this like alien force. And if you hold the wall against these storm riders, you are considered a proper veteran. You know, only the best of the best seem to go there. So I think that a lot of them wanted to, like, again, this bridge burner thing where they want to kill their captain or whatever because they don't trust them, and they're never very good. But with Faradan saw that, it seems to be a bit different because they realise that she is a proper veteran. She's not just a commissioned officer.
Let's move on and talk about Mappo and Ikariam, because there were some really interesting developments there, I think, in this section. We had Ikariam. He's got a new companion. What's his name? I didn't write it down. That's it. Who is an agent of the Nameless Ones. And he's infiltrated himself into being Ikariam's new companion. See, I'm wondering whether at some point Ikariam is going to realise he's been duped and that he's going to see Mappo and remember him and Mappo are actually, you know, the true bros, not this new guy. But we know that the Nameless Ones are using Ikariam for their own...
Yeah, for their own purpose.
Whatever it is they're looking to do. I turned to you at one point and I said, Mappo's not dead though. Like, he's not. He's got to have survived that. And then we get confirmation that he's survived. It's Magora and Iskarul Pust who recover him, bring him back to health. But there's a really interesting part where Mappo is in this dreamlike state, and there's someone that he sees, some kind of goddess, I think, who is talking about Shadow Throne and saying, oh, Shadow Throne assumes that he knows where my allegiances lie. I couldn't work out who that was. I don't know if you know who that was.
It's mentioned. It's Ardetta. I think she's been mentioned once in this whole series.
Right, okay.
The prologue to Memories of Ice, when we had the Elder Gods, Calor mentioned that mentioned her name and about the fact that he was giving her tributes in Jakakaru. So she's like I believe some kind of elder god / witch, very long lived obviously, in that part of the Malazan world. That's all we've got from her so far, just that one scene on Kala.
Some interesting stuff happened with Gano's Paran as well, and the Dragali Trading Guild.
Oh yeah.
And the Jagger Realm of Death. I loved that visual of
the bridge.
Yeah, like the bridge and how you have these different layers. You know, it's older even than the Warren of Death.
The Hold of Death.
The Hold of Death. Yeah, it's like an even older place.
Yeah, it's what the Jaggets call their mythical underworld.
Yeah.
And again, like you said, it's this layering. So like the history that we know of, there's obviously more deeper down.
Yeah. And Paran's realisation of what happened from the first book where he released those 2 Hounds of Shadow from Dragonpur. We get a bit of confirmation of what the Hounds of Shadow are, how they seem to be part of the Deragoths.
Yeah, well, yeah, so those 2 Hounds of Shadow, when they got released, they found their equivalent in the Deragoth. That's how they're somehow linked, and that's why those 2 hounds are dead, because the 2 Deragoth are dead as well.
Because they were killed by Karsa.
Yeah.
And those were the Deragoths that were released by Trull and Onrak.
Exactly, and that's why they had the conversation with Shadow Throne, where if they release these Deragoth right now, they're just going to go rampaging through the realm of Shadow. I think that's why they had that conversation to push the hounds into the normal realm outside of the realm of Shadow. So yeah, definitely a link there. And then we know that the Deragoth are a race of beasts from way back when they were the first humans, the Aerosol, and we had that scene from Ozark in book 4.
Yes. Where
they went back in the past, in that kind of dream world, where they saw the Deragoth with the Aerosol fighting off the K'chain Chamail, and it was seen as the Aerosol were the subservient to the Deragoth at that point.
Yeah.
And then the Deragoth, dying out, made a pact with Decembacillus to turn themselves into a diver, an immortal, like to try and ascend, essentially, because that's what they were all trying to do.
Yeah.
And I think the Deragoth, the remaining Deragoth and Decembacillus are kind of, they're linked. I think they're the same thing at this point.
Yeah, but now they're being released because of what's happening with the Nameless Ones, setting this demon on Mappo.
Yeah.
It's all coming together. Because
they're released to tackle that, what the Nameless Ones did by releasing the bindings of that diver.
Yes, because Ganeth, the Jagger woman, she I think it's been hinted that she was the one who imprisoned that demon initially.
Was it?
Wow, I'm sure that. So when Ganos came across her, he was like, "Oh, what's your plan? What are you doing?" And she said something about how she was trying to put something back, something that she had trapped has been released, and she's looking to put it.
Yeah, you might
back.
be right. I just assumed it was Decembacillus, but yeah, you might be right. Yeah.
So yeah, maybe,
100%.
unless it's referring to something else.
Potentially, I just assumed it was Decembacillus.
The last thing that I've got written down is the end of part 2 with Heberic, Cutter, Sklara, Felison the Younger. What was that?
Yeah, that happened.
To me, it seemed like it came out of nowhere. These 2 Talani Mass show up, slaughter them, and I'm sat there reading it thinking, I don't know how to react to that.
Yeah, so there's hints during that. Well, let's think about the Tilani Mass, right? What Tilani Mass do we know about that are on this continent right now?
The ones that Karsa met.
Well, not met. They were his gods, and they followed him to this continent. But they are Tilani Mass. They're the broken ones.
But there's 7 of them. But there was only 2.
But there were. I think one of them's dead, or 2 of them are dead. Or I think.
Oh yeah, Karsa killed them.
Karsa killed one, but we know that they're the only. From my mind, when I'm thinking of Tilani Mass on this continent right now, the only ones that we know about are those ones that are serving the crippled god.
There was a really interesting part with Heberic, where he was thinking about how he doesn't want to be on the side of Treach. He wants to bring Fenna back.
We keep on getting this sense, or this Heberic stating Treach chose wrong. He doesn't think he's the right person for whatever job Trake has for him as this destriant. Keeps on stating it over and over again every time we get to his POV. He just doesn't want to be doing what he's doing, but he's got this responsibility and he has to do it.
We had some explanation around the gods and the difference between gods and ascendants, how gods are essentially beings who have gathered a following, and that's what allows them to go even higher to godhood. I thought that was really interesting, but that just seemed to be a recurring theme throughout the book of people who follow these gods.
One thing I want to touch upon quickly was also Hedge and Ganos Paran bringing all of these dead bridge burners, not necessarily back to life, but their spirits, which haven't passed over Hood's Gate. Obviously, they're all ascended at this point, as we know from book 4, with Ganos blessing them in the crypt at Black Coral, as well as the Tano Spirit Walker from Kinloch. And they seem to have this job now. Edge was insinuating, and to do this job, he wants something in return. You know, he wants a card created in the deck of dragons, which was kind of cool.
Because the last we saw of Hedge, he was saying he doesn't trust Ganos, and so he deliberately kind of manoeuvred himself to be left alone in that death realm in order to do something.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm really intrigued about where that goes and what responsibilities these dead bridge burners have and what they're going to be coming up against.
I know that we haven't talked about Apsalar.
We haven't talked about Quick Ben, Calam, Cotillion.
There's a lot we haven't talked about.
A lot of it we haven't talked about.
But I feel like we've covered the main parts. So we'll talk about those maybe after part 3.
That sounds good.
We have reached the end of part 3 in the Bonehunters, and there's a lot that we need to discuss. Are you ready, Sam? Thought we should start with Heberic. During our last update, I was talking about how I wasn't convinced that they're all dead. It just seemed like it had come out of nowhere. And we do get some clarification that it was actually younger Felison who was the target of the Talan Imass. I obviously assumed it was Heberic, but I guess they were trying to kill 2 birds with one
I think it's both.
My understanding is that she's meant to be the replacement for Shaik as the head of the Whirlwind.
Yeah, I don't know if that's what the Tilani Mass want for her, if they want her in a role for the crippled god, in the crippled god's house. Again, killing 2 birds with 1 stone and killing off Heberic at the same time, because in my mind, there is a reason why the crippled god doesn't want Heberic to reach the Ostoral Island and go back to that jade statue.
But they're taken in there anyway, Cutter and Sklara and what's his name? Barathor, the one who's related to
Yeah, because we know that his body's changed, so he's mummified, but his hands are now solid jade.
Like the statues.
So
Interesting.
something's going to occur.
Yeah, something's going on there. That at the moment is my favourite storyline.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know what, I think it's because I like a group dynamic.
See, yeah, it's my least favourite.
Really?
100%.
Oh, see,
Yeah.
we are not the same person.
No, don't get me wrong. I like the growth of Cutter throughout this book. Going from obviously Crocus to Cutter. From Crocus was one of the first POVs we had in book 1, and now we see him. You know, he's been fighting Ida, he's been fighting Tilanai Mas, he's been going into a Zath house. Yeah. He's been through an absolute roller coaster in these books. So I do like his development. I think Heberic for me has always been a very confusing character. Even in the reread, it still kind of confuses me. Scylla, I don't think we've had that much with.
But see, she's sorry to interrupt. Yeah. She's the person that I am most interested in within that group. I thought the way that it handled how she was pregnant through
motherhood and
she didn't want to be pregnant and she didn't want to keep her baby, but Lorik was pressuring her and trying to put that on her and say it's your responsibility, whereas she was kind of pushing against that. And the villagers as well, that's what I really liked, how they were questioning Lorik and saying, well,
Barathol in particular,
why like there are women in this village who will love this child, so why are you
and I do like Lorik's self-realization when he's talking to Greyfrog about how that's a problem that he has. So I like how Erikson did that with Lorik as well.
At least he's self-aware.
But it's interesting because when we were talking about it previously, we just assumed that they were all dead. But if you go back and you read the actual chapter, all the POVs that were stated in that chapter, not one of them was Felison.
Yeah.
Which was really cool. It was a big clue.
Yeah. I really like their story arc at the moment.
Yeah, I like Barathol. We got, again, how Erikson is able to give us just enough information to make us be intrigued into him. The fact that he was obviously in Arran during the Malazan conquest when they controlled Arran, and he killed one of the fists. And he's known as the person who opened up the door to the Tilanai Mas, so a traitor to the people of Seven Cities. That's why Lorik was so hated him so, and that's why it looks like he's gone into exile. He tells everybody Tilanai Mas don't need doors. So obviously I didn't open it up for him. And
Cutter is also thinking to himself, this doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would betray.
No, and I think he's a likeable character in the sense that you see him with Scylla, like you said, and also with Chow, the person who's described as an adult with a child's mind.
He seems very compassionate.
Yeah,
I like
him. I think he's a very likeable character.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting as well that Mappo, Iskarul Pust and Magora are currently on a boat, and it's revealed that they're on their way to the Ottertarl Sea.
Yeah, for what? We don't know.
No idea.
Yeah, I just hope that at some point Mappo is able to actually get back to Ikarian, because obviously he's a very sad boy right now. Again, I don't know what Spite's involvement is. As of yet, we know we got a bit of her from the beginning in the prologue when she betrayed the Nameless Ones in that ritual of unbinding they did with the diver. Obviously, she has her own agenda. She's sister to Lady Envy, and she wasn't the most likable character.
We also had the reveal that Curdle and Telrast are also dragons, which I think that was kind of obvious.
It was heavily
even
hinted
I could guess that.
Yeah, it was heavily hinted at.
Yeah, so much that's happened in this section.
Yeah.
I've also got written down Carcer. I find him so irritating, but actually
I think a lot of people find him irritating.
I think it's just the way that, we have that scene.
He's very direct.
Yeah, he literally just does not think before he speaks, does not really consider, at least this is my perception, he doesn't really consider the consequences of his actions. He gets something into his mind, decides, this is my moral, this is what I stand for, I'm going to do this, regardless.
I think that's what we're supposed to feel for Carcer right now with Samar Dev. I think that's a really interesting dynamic,
because
them travelling together.
She is almost reflecting how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
There was the scene where they come across the Tista Dur, they're trying to help, I think it's the Anabar tribe, they're trying to help them, because they're being invaded by these Tistadeur. And Carcer just agrees to fight their emperor, which we know is Rulad, and we know
that's their plan. They're going out on these treks along the sea to find champions for Rulad to fight. But yeah, there are moments in this where he's kind of going back to his original ways of witnessing. He's saying like, "Witness me, I promise," or "I vow," and stuff like that. And Samar Dev's like, chill out, hold on,
calm down,
maybe just do this instead of vowing to destroy all of this civilization.
The voice of reason.
I like the dynamic those two have got right now.
I do, because Carcer is not my favourite character, but I think seeing her reflect what I'm feeling, it helps me feel justified. And also it's adding a little bit of humour of like, oh no, Carcer's doing this again.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I've actually been enjoying their perspectives. It's going to be interesting when Carcer comes up against Rulad, if that
does happen.
That's going to be very interesting. Shall we talk about Perrin? Because Perrin's story has obviously been building throughout the book. We see him come across the camp of Dujek. Dujek, we know, doesn't end up making it, but I actually quite liked the way that Perrin infiltrated the camp, and how he didn't really infiltrate it, but he was taken into the camp and he was like, yeah, my name's Captain Kindly.
Who we know, and we've met from the beginning of book 4 in the Ashok regiment. So I thought again that was really cool.
It's interesting that there's now the two siblings, the two that are now
controlling
in charge,
the only armies which Lysine and the Malazans seem to have, but go on, sorry.
What I've written down is, we don't know. It was hinted at briefly. We don't know where Lysine's loyalties lie in this God War.
She has been working with Dujek, and that's like that whole bit with the Dujek renegade army in Genabacchus was planned. There's been hints that something's going to happen which could cause Tavor and Lestara to go on their own way. It's when Cotillon went to Lestara and said, you at some point soon you will have to choose between Lysine and Tavor. So I think that hints heavily at some kind of divide that's going to happen.
I've been feeling that for a while. Even in book 4, you got the sense that Tavor wasn't happy with the Empress. I mean,
why would she be? At the end of the day, like, she's the reason why she lost her brother. She thought she lost her sister at that point, or she still lost her sister. I don't think she would be happy at all. But we also know that Lysine doesn't like people. These fists gain too much power. She culled, obviously, a lot of the older original band of characters that were with Kellanvad.
It's almost like she is afraid of betrayal. It's almost like she doesn't trust anyone, and she's not taking any chances.
She's in my mind, she's an extremely paranoid character.
That's the word I was looking for.
That's the reason why she has an organisation called the Claw, which wasn't the case with Kellanvad and Dancer originally. They had the Talons, which looked at outside threats, but the Claw is like an internal spy agency.
I never thought of it like that, actually. Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it?
So you have to be paranoid to have complete control over this internal spy agency, which is literally spying and getting rid of your opponents within your own empire. So definitely a paranoid character, but definitely, like you said, foreshadowing something is going to cause that divide potentially.
Whether it happens in this book or not sure.
But no, in terms of Perrin's character, I liked the build-up. I liked how Polyol played out, how, again, it was foreshadowed, that little bit of Ottarl, which he was able to pin Polyol so she wasn't able to escape her physical presence in that city. I thought that was cool. I did feel like the sister...
Quickben's sister.
I feel like that came
It was very sudden. Suddenly we were getting this backstory.
Yeah, I like the backstory.
Yeah,
I like the backstory because I like Quickben's character as a kid. Almost he's pranking, but he's tricking his family. He's causing havoc with his own family. They can't control him.
It felt like we had this section introducing the sister. It's like, oh, okay, Quickben has a sister. The next thing we know, he's transporting himself to the city to save her, and it's like, whoa, where's this come from?
I think thinking back to the actual scenes, I think it was a way for Erikson to again have that meet up with Bottle, which has been discussed all the way through this book that it's going to happen, and Bottle being scared of it happening, and then Callum and more people realising that Bottle is a lot more than what people think, and he's obviously growing in power as a character. And we also got that key point of that he's being not controlled but influenced still by the Erikson. So that's something again that Erikson doesn't want us to forget. Even when he's like half asleep, he's still able to like outdo Kalam in this type of magic, which is one of the, according to Quick Ben, one of the oldest types of magic in the Malazan world, which is again really cool.
We saw again as well the Shadow Throne. Cotillion does not
they don't like each other.
Does not like Quick Ben.
No,
because that happened even in that was Gardens of the Moon.
That was Gardens of the Moon. Yeah.
The last bit that I've got to talk about is the Malazans. Which is obviously, the Bonehunters, the formation of the Bonehunters. That's obviously a pretty big deal within this chapter. I loved the scene where they were reunified.
Yeah, it was extremely rewarding.
Yeah,
from the
very
scenes,
satisfying.
Very satisfying. From the scenes at the beginning of the last part, with obviously them going through absolute hell in Yagatan. Coming out of it alive, and then that reunion, I think it was very well earned. Extremely rewarding. Just the way like that Farad'n saw, put herself out there and said, arrest me if you need to, and then Fiddler coming over and basically saying, if you want to hang her, then you're gonna have to find a lot more nooses for the rest of us, and what that's going to do to the morale of the Bonehunters as well.
That's what I could think the whole way through, because even just before they were, reunified, I think it was Keneb was thinking, everyone is so broken, like, I don't know how we're going to continue. But seeing them come back together, that was my first thought, is like, what that's going to do for the morale within the group.
They're essentially all the veterans. They are the veterans. It's what happens when an army loses all of its veterans. The army's broken.
I actually said that, I think, at one point.
Exactly, yeah. One thing that was really interesting with that bit as well, maybe we should talk about Grub.
I've literally written down the prophecy that I think he gave, because we've already seen he has this tendency to scarily predict stuff. Even when he was saying in this chapter, like, leave an extra day, don't leave now. And Keneb was like, all right, I'm going to trust you because you've predicted stuff before. So yeah, like, let's give it another day. Going back to the prophecy though, what he says is Sepik will be bad, Nemil will be good, then bad, and after that we find friends, and then we end up where it all started. But that's when she realises everything, almost everything. And then he mentions something about a big man with cut hands that says yes, and he wants his bone whistle back, because he's talking about how he's found a bone whistle and he's keeping it because he wants it back.
Wasn't there something about a bone whistle that was taken from the Salander, which was on the?
There was a whistle.
Yeah, it was on the guy that was speared through in the captain's cabin. Which we know obviously Karsa did in book 4, and I think that had he had a whistle.
The whistle, I think, was what was used to.
Was it used to control the Andy heads? Maybe. I can remember a whistle being on the cylinder. I might be wrong, but that's
whether it's a bone whistle. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
interesting.
But yeah, definitely an interesting character, because back in book 4 we got an epigraph of Grub, and he was discussed as being in some far future of the Malazan Empire, in the late Empire stages. I think it was stated that he was the first sword of the Empire, so we know that character becomes something else. So it's, again, that's what I like about the epigraph sometimes. It foreshadows things. I don't think Erikson expects us to remember all of these epigraphs all the time.
Because I definitely don't.
And some of these characters, like when, for example, Paran was in the I can't remember the city name, it began with G, but when he was fighting and he had that, big confrontation with Polion, he found Soliel in that child, and that child was the child that Fiddler rescued.
Was it Fiddler or Clam?
No, it was Fiddler, because at that point she led Fiddler. That's when he was introduced to Kimlock, the Eternal Spirit Walker, and that's how the song was created, which ascended all of the dead bridge burners.
I picked up on that. Yeah, that was really good. Those little paragraphs at the start of each chapter. Yeah, you told me they're important, so I read them. But sometimes I'm just like, I don't.
There's so many of them, but they are important. I don't think you need to really. It's just I think very rewarding when something gets connected.
I get the impression though that they're more satisfying to read if you're rereading the series, because I think there's a lot of foreshadowing.
Yeah,
in those parts.
100%. I think so. I think rereading this series is a lot more rewarding. It's not to say that you're not going to have a good time.
No, I'm still enjoying it.
Yeah.
I am very curious to see how everything wraps up. But the only other thing I wanted to mention is I was wrong about Ganeth, the Jagged. I was wrong about her being the one that trapped the, what's it called, the Trollball demon.
Trollball. Neither of us know how to
No,
pronounce
neither of
that,
us
and
knows.
it's definitely not how you pronounce it. But yeah,
It was revealed that it was the Skykeeps that she'd imprisoned that have obviously now been freed, and she ends up being killed by Kachain Chimale, and we know that it's the non-chaotic type of Kachain Chimale. The short tails,
ones.
yeah.
Again, it's interesting that how Erikson does that. We know the Kachain Chimale. We've seen him a few times. We've seen him more in this book, but we keep getting bits added on. So now we know that the long tails are the more chaotic ones, and the short tails are the ones which were, I think, quoted as slaves to machines.
Yes.
And they were at war. There was a civil war, which we know about in a previous book, which happened, and that's kind of, yeah. But
I think we've seen some of the technology as well in Mappo's perspective.
yeah, in
We saw
Mappo's
some of
perspective,
it.
where he was in the when he was in the Skykeep investigating it. Yeah, and in terms of Ganeth, that character, she was, I would say, a very small character.
Yeah.
But even when I was reading that, I felt sorry for Ganeth as a character, because we'd obviously seen her help Paran. And then when she was in the Skykeep looking to see what had happened, she mentioned like characters which we'd been with before, two other Jagged names which came up, which we know Carcer had met in book 4. I'm not going to pronounce their name, but the one that in Seven Cities, where he saw her under a stone, saved her, and then that Jagged led Carcer to the one that was part of that Azath house, the one that was attached to the tree. Which again, I just those details.
Yeah.
Like I love those details.
I don't pick up on a lot of that stuff,
Yeah.
so I'm glad I'm reading this with you, because you can remind me of stuff. You've got a better memory than me. But I think we're gonna wrap up, if you're okay
think that's enough
with.
to
Yeah,
talk
I think
about,
that's enough for part 3. Next time we check in with you, it will be once we've finished the book. Very
not long
exciting.
to go.
Hi everyone. So we are here to wrap up our final thoughts on The Bonehunters by Steven Erikson. I think I already know what you're going to rate this, because you told me last night, but for the purpose of the video, what is your final rating?
5 stars.
Yeah.
Easily 5 stars.
Yeah, your favourite book in the series so far?
On a reread, yes.
Okay, so it wasn't the first time around?
No, I still think at this point on my first time through it would have been Memories of Ice, but
Okay.
right now, yeah.
I think for me it's somewhere in the middle, because I think that there were some very memorable moments throughout the Bonehunters, but I prefer the books that feel more like self-contained story. I think that this and House of Chains, they feel like middle books in a series, which isn't a bad thing. To me, it feels like there's several plot threads going on all at once. I preferred this to House of Chains because, at least with this, it did feel like there were some convergences towards the end where characters were in the same place and where it was kind of slotting together. But yeah, for me, this is somewhere like in the middle of my rankings, probably like 3rd place or 4th place. In terms of the final part, we had the long-awaited confrontation between Lysine and Tavor, which was heavily foreshadowed. I loved that scene because we don't get the perspective of Lysine or Tavor, but there were just these micro moments. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, is this intentional? Is Lysine deliberately driving Tavor away?
I think with Tavor, she wanted Kalam and Tavor to be on her side. She wanted to bring Tavor to Unta to gain influence there with her, to try and push back against Malik Rel and Corblodon. She wanted Kalam to be able to eventually get rid of Malik Rel and Corblodon, as well as Pearl, but Kalam first, because she offered the job to Kalam after she offered the job to Pearl. But both of them basically said no to her, and she's put herself in that position basically. Malik Rel has gained too much influence. He garnered influence within the Claw with his shadow organisation, so even that is suspect now to Lysine, so she can't even fully trust the organisation that she created to protect the Empire from its own internal threats. And you even get that moment in the epilogue where he's talking to Taishren, I believe it is, where he states that she's made too many mistakes at this point. You can see the influence now shifting, especially with, you know, what happened with the Wiccans, the mob. It was all planned by Malik Rel, and you saw that in the foreshadowing within Book 4. And then there was all this foreshadowing. Callum needed to make a choice. Like, I think he got that card within the when Fiddler was doing the deck reading. It was all about Callum making that choice at the end when he agreed to take Tavor and Tamba back through Malaz back to the ships.
I thought that was a great sequence where they were travelling through the city to try and get back to the harbour. I did think it was a little... with what happens to Callum, because he's a character that we've known since the first book, when he gets that arrow from Pearl.
The power-up arrow, yeah.
Yeah, that to me, my reaction was, well, this isn't actually happening. Like, Callum isn't actually going to be dead, because that would be a really anticlimactic way for him to go at this point in the series. And then obviously we see the aftermath of that, and he's taken to the Azath house. We don't know. I mean, I'm assuming that he's still alive. I'm assuming that is the case. The whole way that was kind of handled, it's got me thinking about a lot of what I would consider major deaths throughout this series, because we're on book 6, and I feel like the only deaths that have really impacted me are Whiskey Jack and Felison as Shaik within the Whirlwind camp. And then to a certain extent Dujek as well, kind of, but again I felt like that earlier in the book was a bit anticlimactic, because we hadn't really seen much of Dujek in this book. He'd been a prominent figure in some of the earlier books, but I think for a death to really impact me emotionally, we have to have spent time with them.
Yeah, and I think this is the difference between what I think about this series and what you think about this series in terms of what you would consider the minor characters. I wouldn't consider them minor in that sense. So for me, a lot of characters that I love died in this book, because you had Truth, you had Pella. You know, these are the characters that we've been with for a considerable amount of time. Yes, we haven't had that much time with them on page. I feel like the way Erikson writes, I'm able to connect more with these characters, and I get the sadness from the other characters when they speak about them. Especially, Truth, when he was, in Yagatin and he sacrificed himself to save everybody. That moment meant a lot to me. Dujek, when he passed, this High Fist, which had given absolutely everything to the Empire, who kind of died off screen, and I think Erikson did that on purpose, which again really impacted me. And all the other minor characters which died in Yagatin, we've had moments with them, and to me, those moments I think mean a lot more than they have done with you, just because I think I'm able to connect with them more with just Erikson's writing style, which you need more time with them. You need maybe POVs with them. You need more pages.
I think that's what it is for me. It's more page time. But I understand why you feel that way, and I understand, like, I can still see the emotion in those scenes. It's just that it's not like affecting me quite as much, I don't think, as it is you. And
I feel like, apart from just advancing some plot points and giving some foreshadowing, I think a lot of this book focused on Tavor as a character.
Yes, and I loved that.
And I really, really, really like that.
Yeah, I really... because we don't get Tavor's perspective, but I think that in some ways, when Erikson writes these prominent characters, you are getting page time with them because they're with other characters within their points of view. I think sometimes the way that he develops those characters works better for me than these kind of like side characters, as I call them, that you're only getting like the odd paragraph from every so often.
Yeah, no, I get that. I do. For this book as well, there are a lot of full circle moments which I really enjoyed, especially from the the prologue with Hellion and Banashar.
Yeah.
That moment where Hellion dived off the boat and went into Malaz City to get a drink, and she found Banashar and arrested him. I thought that moment was so great, funny. brilliant, and it cut up the despair you were feeling at that moment with, you know, the civil war which was about to occur, you know, with the mob turning on the 14th. And that's what I like about Erikson as well. He puts those moments in just to counteract all of the grimness which is happening during the scenes. There was that moment, like you said, with Kalam. I enjoyed that moment because it just brought me back to book 1. They were saved in the Azath house in Gardens of the Moon in the same way that Kalam has now supposedly potentially been saved. Apsalar, when she was talking about the moon and describing it like a garden, going all the way back to book 1 where she was talking about that with Crocus. I really enjoyed those moments.
There was some interesting stuff with Tamba. I thought that she was the Destrian of Treach because we get the reveal that Heberic was actually the shield anvil, and at one point she's described as having tiger eyes, and we've had like repetition around her amber eyes, and so I was thinking, is she somehow connected to Treach? I still don't know whether that's the case, because we do towards the end of that particular chapter, this reveal that it was the aerosol who has been using her. I still haven't got a good grasp on the aerosol because she seems to pop up every so often.
I think that she's had a lot more influence in this book. You know, when she was pushing the fleet along to gain a few more days to get them to where they needed to go faster. Moments where she helped bottle out, pushing the magic that Quick Ben was using against the Tista Dur when they were on the ships against their fleet. There was obviously the moment where she took over Tamba to try and protect Tavor. And there was that moment right at the end with Icarium where she seemed to put him to sleep. You could say that it kind of felt like, what's the term? Deus Ex Machina.
Deus Ex Machina, yeah.
Yeah, there's kind of that. You could see it that way, where it's very convenient and this character just appears to save some characters or, push the narrative along. But if you think all the way back to book 5, I say all the way back, it's literally, a month ago.
Last book.
But there was that moment where the Neric were travelling to the Ida camp with Seren and the others to go to that meeting with the Ida, and Mayan sanctified that ground that they were on, and the Neric worshipped Eris. So in my mind, that's when she became more prevalent.
Because at that point, it was probably a couple of years ago.
It was years ago, yeah. And then the next time I think the Eris were ever mentioned, or the Erisol was ever mentioned, was when she took Trull's seed.
It's the end of book 4.
And now she's taken Bottle seed, from what I can see. But she's also been described as a time traveller.
Yeah.
So we know she goes backwards and forwards in time. I don't know if she knows what she's doing. I think there's going to be more information on the aerosol when we go through this series, but I can understand why people kind of get annoyed about that particular character because it just seems very convenient.
Yeah, but it might be one of those where on reread it doesn't feel that much like convenience. Even going back to Gardens of the Moon, the ending of the Gardens of the Moon quite annoyed me because we had that Deus Ex Machina moment with the Azath house seemingly coming out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think in a book 1 of a series, I think that's okay in a 10-book series, but when now we're in book 6, I personally think that we shouldn't just have random stuff just come up that we don't know about, especially in book 6. I feel like there should have been enough world building lore developed at this point for us to go, oh yeah, okay, I get it, But with Aerosol, that's still maybe not the case. I think on my first read of this, all of that stuff just went right over my head.
It's going over my head quite a lot.
But you still need to kind of lock it away.
We briefly mentioned there the conflict or the battle between the Ida and Trull, Onrak, the children protecting the first throne, which I don't think that is actually... Is that the first throne? I'm a little bit confused on that.
Yeah.
It is the first throne.
It's the first throne of the Tilan Imas, so it's the Imas's throne. Yeah, so there's 2 thrones that the Ida are after on behalf of the crippled god. There's the Throne of Shadow,
yes,
which would control all of Curl Demelaine, and then there's the first throne, which is the Tilana Master.
Right, okay, that's where I was getting a bit confused.
Yeah.
But we did have that conflict, and I felt so much for Ikariam in that moment, because again, it's a character we've been following since book 2, and already earlier in the book I felt so awful on behalf of him and Mappo being forced, separated, and then to see him be kind of pushed pushed into something that he didn't want to do. Like, he's almost got two sides, Ikariam and Lifeslayer, this alter ego, if you want to call it that, where he becomes consumed by rage, and it broke my heart a little bit.
Yeah, and it seems obviously the Nameless Ones are using him as a weapon.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because they seem to be on their own, where some of the gods are kind of trying to pool their resource together to try and fight the crippled god. The Nameless Ones are kind of outside of that and are just doing their own thing.
Yeah.
Not necessarily knowing if
it's going to work.
What the outcome of that like confrontation is going to be between Ikariam and Rulad. But no, I agree. I think not just Ikariam in that situation. Yes, he was being manipulated, and we know the reasons why he is the way he is. We got the confirmation that when he attacked the Azath house, it made him this way.
Yeah, when he was trying to free his dad.
His dad, who didn't even want to be freed. Yeah. Right at the end, where the scene was closing out, and you had Cotillion just walk over to the wall, sit down, and then just put his head in his hands. I loved Erikson for that moment because it just gave me so much more from Cotillion as a character. Yeah. He's one of my favourite characters in this whole, and I think his story arc in this book alone is really, really good.
Now that we're at the end of the book, I have a few what I'm going to call rhetorical questions. Mm-hmm. So I'm not necessarily looking for answers.
I'll give you answers to all of them and spoil everything.
Yeah, thanks. No, these are all questions that at the end of this book I now am hoping that they're going to be addressed in future books. We've got 4 more books to go, so I'm assuming that this stuff is going to come up. But the first one I've got is, what is Apsalar? What is she going to do now? Because the last we saw, she's been released by Cotillion, she's completed her list, I don't know what she's going to be doing now, and Curdle and Tellerast, I'm assuming, are going to go with her, maybe. I want to see what their backstory is, because we didn't get much of them in that final part. We know that they're dragons, but beyond that, don't really know what their story is. Will we see the Wiccans again? Because the last we saw, they're going back to the Wiccan Plains to, their homeland. I'm not sure if we're going to see them again. Ikariam versus Karsa versus Rulad. It feels like that's what the next book potentially is going to focus on, is we have Ikariam and Karsa, who have both been designated challengers, and we're potentially going to see them go up against Rulad. I don't know. But there was a really interesting moment where someone mentioned Ikariam to Karsa, and he said, "Oh yeah, Ikariam, I've met him, I almost killed him." It's like, no, Karsa, you didn't, but okay, we'll let that slide. Yeah. What's next for Perrin and younger Fellison? Because the last we saw, Perrin is still on 7 cities. He has Dujek's army. One
thing about that, I did like the symmetry with Perrin gaining his own army, and then more followers with Mathok, who we obviously met in book 4. Yeah. Tavor gaining the Greyhelms, which we haven't talked about, which again I think is an important aspect. Followers of Fandaray and Tog, where the Grey Swords were followers of Fenna.
Yes.
But obviously they knew that Tavor was going to be there. They've been waiting for 2 years or something along that line. So I think that's important to keep locked away. But Paran with his army, where are they going to go?
We've already covered what's going on with the Erisol. Is Kalam alive? And then I've also written down Cutter and Scalara. They seem to be going back to Genabakis, which I feel there's some unresolved stuff. Don't know what's going to be happening there. So that's going to be interesting, because I quite like Cutter and Scalara's dynamic.
And Barathol and
yes, who I'm very curious about.
Lots of characters, as well as Tavor got back on the boat, and Bottle had brought a bunch of people with him.
Yeah, including Withal from book 5, who was the one that created the sword the crippled god gave to Rulad. He's there with a few Tistandi, including What's her name?
The Tistandi from the Drifter Valley, Anamanda Rake's kin. It's a long name, but we believe it's Corlat's mum.
Or grandmother. I think it's her grandmother,
I think
you
it's
think
her
it's her mum, but she's somehow related to Corlat,
She's somehow related to Corlat, and they're husband and wife now, it seems. As well as Carthrall Crust.
Parthenon
Crust, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which we've met before. He's the one that took Callum back to Malaz. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, lots of not new characters, but...
Characters returning.
Yeah, lots of stuff being set up, like Erikson likes to do between books, so...
Yeah. I'm very excited to get into the next book. Reaper's Gale, I've heard, is one of those that I think some people don't like as much. Have I misunderstood that, or...?
I don't know, if I'm honest with you. I personally haven't heard that. Out of all of Malazan, there's a scene in the next book, which, for me, it's one of the scenes that I always think about when I think of Malazan. And it always hits me every time I think about it. It's probably one of the most emotional scenes in the whole series for me. So I'm looking forward to getting back to that.
Right, okay. Yeah. Interested to see what that is. Yep. Are you going to be joining me for the next vlog?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do something similar where we check in at the end of each point. I think that's a good place to wrap up this video then, because it's going to be quite long. I'm not looking forward to editing this, but no, it's all been good stuff. I think we've had some really good stuff to talk about. So yeah, let us know in the comments any of your thoughts and feelings on the Bonehunters, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Click subscribe if you would like to see more videos from me, but otherwise I will see you next time. Bye.